What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Titletown Talk. I'm your host, Ian Ewing. That's all I got to say. I'm sure you guys are feeling the same way. We got our hearts ripped out yet again in the playoffs, a true staple of being a Packer fan, I would say. After leading 21-3 going into halftime, 27-16 with, 5 minutes left in the game, Jordan Love throws for 4 touchdowns. The Packers defense, who just got diced up by Derrick Henry, holds the Bears offense under 16 to 16 in that final 5 minutes. Guys, Next Gen had the Packers with a 95% chance of winning the game after the golden touchdown late in the fourth quarter. But instead, the Packers drive down, miss another field goal, which was the second in the game missed by McManus. He'd also missed an extra point. Bears go down, they take the lead. Jordan Love in the offense, they get a chance to go win the game. 30 to go, I think, at that point. They get all the way down to the 30. If Jaden Reed just catches the damn ball on a great throw by Jordan Love. Instead, he drops it, and that becomes a microcosm of the game. The Packers drop the ball yet again. This was one of the most devastating collapses that I've ever seen in an NFL game. I want to say it in general, but, you think back to the Packers' history. This still wasn't the worst loss in Packers history. The Packers lost the NFC Championship game against Seattle in 2014. That one was a meltdown of epic proportions, but this one came quite close. And on this episode, we're going to recap the Bears game a little bit, and then we're going to recap the season as a whole. I hope to kind of lighten the mood a bit, but also crush souls at the same time. But I promise if you hang around till the end, you'll feel maybe a little bit better, have a little therapy together, a crash out together, if you will. But honestly, guys, I'm at a loss for words. I was actually at a bar watching this game over in Monona, Buck and Honeys. I actually didn't expect to watch the game. I told some of you that are listening to this that I wasn't going to watch the game because we had dinner reservations at that time. And of course, they threw the Packers and Bears game on the one time that I couldn't watch it. But they had the game on at the bar. So of course I had to watch it. Now, seemed it was much more of a restaurant than a bar, if you guys have been there, but there were 3 TVs with the game on, albeit they were quite small. But there were Bears and Packer fans there, a few. I was out to dinner again with my brother and my sister-in-law. Shout out to both of you for bearing with me. I know my sister-in-law probably won't be listening, but Evan, if you're listening, thanks for bearing with me. I couldn't help but to watch the nightmare ensue. Again, the first half, right? Pretty damn good. But at the end of it, McManus misses a 55-yard field goal, and then they went 3 and out at the start of the third quarter, and you just had a feeling, right, that this game was going to go a certain way, we'll just say. That's the position that we're in as Packer fans at this point, right? They made mistakes in this game that they made all season long in all of their collapses / near collapses. Remember, there's a lot of games this year where they held tough at the end, but they easily could have given it away. I think to the Giants game, the Cardinals game, and we'll talk through all of them in a minute. But again, stupid penalties, drops, horrific offensive line play, which we'll talk about in a second, missed assignments, blown coverages on defense, and it was brutal. It was the same way that they'd been playing the majority of the season. There were really, really high highs and some extremely low lows. And like I said, we'll talk through all of it here on this episode. I want to just go through some takeaways from the Bears game versus recapping the whole thing. What were some of my takeaways / my thoughts leaving that Bears game and just kind of on the season as a whole and where we proceed from here. Takeaway number 1, I think losing the Denver game, it cost them more than just Micah Parsons. And let me explain what I mean by that. We can talk all day about losing Micah as it being the death nail, and I do believe that's true. But I think when the Packers lost Micah Parsons, they didn't just lose their best player. I think they lost hope. And I know that might be a bit cliche and a little bit duh, but I truly believe that. And it's not something that we can quantify as fans. And I think that's why this is a slippery slope, right? But when Jordan threw that interception to Pat Surtain, Christian Watson gets hurt, Xavier McKinney drops a pick on the next drive, Micah consequentially got hurt right after. Evan Williams gets hurt in that game. And then don't forget, Zach Tom gets hurt in that game earlier as well, right? So your third and fourth best player, third or fourth best player. I don't know how you view Zach Tom. I think he's the third best player on the team. I'll go through the rankings at some point in the offseason, but the players are never going to admit this, but I think they all just had the same gut reaction that we all did, that it's just not our season. Or whatever it was, I just think they might have had a feeling of doom at that point. I mean, you heard the way the team talked about Micah on defense. They all said, whenever they given a microphone to talk about, hey, what's different on defense this year? They all said, we got Micah Parsons. So they knew just as much as we did as fans how impactful he was and how big that acquisition was. But then you go out against Chicago, right? And you lose a heartbreaker the week after that, right? The Denver game, then the Bears game. A much different game than this one, by the way, because if Romeo Doubs just recovers an onside kick like people do, 93% of the time in the NFL, they win that Bears game the week after losing against the Broncos and Micah Parsons, and they're going to win the NFC North. And then they're hosting the game the other day instead of going to Chicago. And again, that game was all bad luck, right? Much more about the Bears just, it was much more about how bad the Packers gave up that game than it was about how the way the Bears played. I think the Bears played much better in the playoff game. The second half, I thought they played as well as they could have played, candidly, and I think they made some adjustments that really helped. But that the second Bears game, the first Bears loss in Week 16, that game was about the Packers giving it away, not the Bears winning it, to be honest. But anyway, at that point, you feel, again, think about that game. We'll go into all the details in a minute. You think about that Bears game. They lose that inexplicably. I felt like at that point the team was cursed. And I feel like that got in the Packers players' heads too. So when I say they lost more than Micah Parsons, I think they lost hope. And then when they started to go south early in the second half in this game, I feel like they all just thought like we did. Here we go. We're going to lose this, aren't we? I feel like there were literally players that were thinking that. Now, how does that change on the field? We don't know, right? And yeah, you can put that on coaching. If they fired LaFleur, I would totally get it. And I'm recording this early Wednesday morning. Adam Schefter had reported this morning that it's up in the air whether or not a deal gets done with LaFleur. So I don't think they're going to fire him, but I think we could see a trade. We could see them just not signing him to an extension. We'll see. We're going to save this conversation for another episode, but I do tend to blame the youth of this team more than I do the coaching, and we will talk in detail about, if you guys haven't read this yet, go to acmepackingcompany.com and read Justice Mosqueda's article on the Packers assistant coaches and how they skimp on paying them. I think the assistant coaches being somewhat of a joke across the league is why we're seeing some development stall with some of these players. But again, I don't want to get into that right now. Let me try to get back on track here. ADD moment. Again, that Denver game changed everything. Outside of losing two of your five best players in that game, I just felt like it took the wind out of their sail. 8 minutes into the Denver game, or 8 minutes into the third quarter in the Denver game, that ball leaves Jordan Love's hands. They're up 9 points against the number one seed in the AFC. They're playing really, really well. Watson gets hurt. Everything changes. If they win that Broncos game, there's zero doubt that the Packers are still playing this week. And they might even have home field advantage, right? We'll never know, but I do believe that that's possible. Because, again, if the Packers win out, which I think they could have done, they would have been the number one seed in the NFC. Takeaway number 2, the offensive line was the problem all along in offense. I know it was easy all season to blame the offensive woes on Matt LaFleur, and he's not above blame, I'll tell you that for a fact, whether it was calling too many zone runs out of shotgun or a bevy of other things that we can point to. I've heard people point their arrows at Jordan Love, which is absurd, ignorant, about 40 different ways to put that, which we'll talk about in a second. All along, I truly believe that the offensive line and the way they played is the reason they didn't score 30 points a game. And it is certainly why they didn't score 30-plus points in this Bears game in the second half. Now, Chicago, they got creative. They sent some disguised pressures. They sent the nickel back on several occasions. They blitzed 5 or more. They showed pressure and backed out of it a lot. But the entire second half, the offensive line just forgot how to block. It's particularly Rasheed Walker. He played his last snap as a Packer in this game. That's a fact. Aaron Banks might have played his last as well. We'll see what they do with his contract. But Rasheed Walker played a devastatingly bad game in this one. And it was enough to where I don't even know if he gets paid like we thought he would. He had a 45 grade from PFF. Belton was in the 50s. Sean Ryan played bad at center. it was just a really, really bad game. And here's a damning stat for you guys. Now, let's keep in mind that they lost Elton Jenkins. You can debate whether or not that was as big a loss as it seems on the outside. But Zach Tom going down, their best offensive lineman, had to have an impact in this. In fact, I don't have the stat in front of me, but Jacob Morley, I believe he's with, I don't remember who he's with, but he's on the Pack a Day podcast too. He tweeted out about this. The Packers, I think, they score 10 points higher per game when Zach Tom's on the field or something like that. The stats are dramatic when Zach Tom plays versus when he doesn't. But here's the damning stat I was mentioning. The Packers have not had, since 2014, they've never had a pass protection grade from PFF lower than 10th. And the majority of that time, it was top 5. This season, they were 21st in the NFL. So never being below top 10, this season being essentially double as bad as they were before. They were 21st. Last year, in 2024, they were second in the NFL. So the fall off in the offensive line play was catastrophic. And it's also, remember, that's why they couldn't run the ball this year either. It cost them the game in Cleveland when Zach Tom went out. It cost them the Eagles game for sure. And it probably costed them some of the other games that they lost because they couldn't run the ball in those games. The one thing I do feel confident in is they're going to fire Luke Butkus, the offensive line coach. I don't know how someone has to fall on the sword for how bad they played. And you got to make a decision on Banks. Like I said, I think they're going to bring him back, but I wouldn't be shocked if they moved on. They're going to have to eat some dead money there, but is he worth a, 1 year, $20 million contract? No, he's not. Rasheed Walker's going to be gone. I think Sean Ryan will be gone too. Now, Zach Tom will be healthy next year. He did mention that he's going to have surgery on his partially torn patella tendon, which is a bit scary, but I'd expect he's back by training camp. But this offensive line needs an overhaul. And again, that's the biggest takeaway from this game. And again, we didn't talk about it all near enough during the season, how bad their offensive line was. I certainly didn't on this podcast because, again, I don't know a lot about offensive line play. But it doesn't take it doesn't take a genius to figure that out. An idiot can figure that out. And I think where we kind of get into murky water is not enough people are blaming the offensive line for the woes. They're either blaming Jordan Love or they're blaming the play calling and all that, which, again, play calling is not above blame. But this offensive line made this offense, that's why they were up and down all season. It wasn't the wide receivers. It wasn't Josh Jacobs. I don't think it was Matt LaFleur, and it certainly wasn't Jordan Love. It was the massive decline on the play up front. And if they can stir that up in the offseason and we can see growth from Belton and Morgan, I think this offensive line can be much better in 26. And that's why they never reached their ceiling this season on offense. That's why you saw such peaks and valleys. Because when you don't have consistent offensive line play in front of your quarterback, it's a big problem. So that's takeaway number 2. Takeaway number 3, Jordan Love is a superstar. I know that everybody wants to leave this game and blame somebody for it. I certainly saw some outrageous takes at the end of that game on Facebook, Twitter, whatever. The worst one that I saw, and I'm sorry if anyone listening to this agrees, but you're just wrong, respectfully, sorry. The worst take is that Jordan Love isn't the guy, or, they should put Malik Willis to quarterback. I got news for you. And if you don't watch all 22, you don't pay the $10 a month for NFL Plus, I encourage you to do so and watch the game that Jordan Love played. Jordan Love was outstanding in this game. He finished with 4 touchdowns, no picks, 325. And again, that box score scouting is not the way to judge quarterback play. I can promise you that. But the box score actually represented how well he played in this game. He didn't have any turnover-worthy plays until that final throw. They, of course, credited him with one, but that was the end of the game anyway. He was credited with 3 big-time throws in this game. He was outstanding. But in the second half, the amount of free rushers that the offensive line let hit him, it was so bad. And when the team needed it most in this game, he was outstanding. On the final drive, and this is where I hear a lot of the critiques coming from, he has the deep ball to Jaden Reed, which he point-blank drops. If Jaden Reed catches that ball, they're inside the 30 with more than enough time left and a timeout to, potentially win that game. And honestly, if McManus just makes 2 of the 3 kicks that he missed, that game, that would have been field goal range to win the game. I truly think if Jaden Reed catches that ball, they win the game. And Jordan Love couldn't have walked it to his hands better than that. So then you have the seam throw to Watson. Jordan makes an impossibly great throw there. So good that Watson didn't expect to be able to catch it, honestly. I think he could have or should have caught it. And if he did, the Packers win the game, and they have their Steve Young, Terrell Owens moment against the Packers back in 98 or whatever it was. It's just a shame. And it sucks, right? The 10-second runoff at the end when Sean Ryan got hurt, that really screwed him. That 10 seconds is a lot of time when it comes to how many plays. You can run 3 plays in 10 seconds, technically, that they didn't get back. And that's why they didn't have a timeout, because of bad coaching and people being dumb, right? And you can blame LaFleur for that too. But I cannot stress enough how well Jordan played in this game, of course, but as the season as a whole. It was a bold prediction on this podcast in the preseason that Jordan was going to be in the MVP conversation all year. He most definitely was. Buy your stock for next season. If they can shore up that offensive line, I think that Jordan's going to be in line to win it next season. So that's takeaway number 3. Takeaway number 4, Matthew Golden's a dude. I really hope some of you that tweeted or commented, I had one person message me on Facebook, I'm not going to call out who it was, saying that Golden was a bust and they always take the L on their first round picks. Well, I hope you deleted it, because Matthew Golden played an awesome game in this one. He gets his first touchdown on an incredible play, probably a top 5 play the whole season for the Packers. His route running is probably the best on the team at this point. He's got the best hands on the team. He's clutch as hell. That 4th down that he caught on the sidelines was 0 effort. Didn't faze him at all that was the season on the line. Next season, despite what I would call a great game by Romeo Doubs, Romeo's not going to be here. So all of his snaps are going to go to Golden and Wicks. I do think Wicks is going to have a good season. He's got a high ceiling. But Golden's going to be a big part of the 2026 team and beyond. So that's just a quick aside there. Takeaway number 5, I think this is the last one I have. Why is no one pissed at Jeff Hafley? I want to start off by saying I'm not mad at Jeff Hafley in this game. I thought he did an awesome job of shutting down Chicago's running attack, which I thought would be scary in this one. I thought that actually Hafley did a really nice job. The Packers got 26 pressures in this game, which was a season high, without Micah Parsons, by the way. But when the game mattered most, they could not get stops. That play by Keyshawn Nixon on the 4th and 8, the throw that every quarterback guru, everybody that's has a platform is talking about, the Caleb Williams completion to Roma Dunze. I have no idea what Keyshawn Nixon was doing on that play. It was inexplicably bad. That play was bad enough to me that he certainly doesn't get a starting spot next year automatically. You don't want to cut him. He's making chump change this year, but after all the consternation about him being a cornerback one doesn't make that bad of a play there. They just don't. So I think he was trying to be a big play guy there. I don't know what it was, right? He undercut that route. Roma Dunze catches the ball. Chicago gets a score on that drive. If they stop him there, the game's over. Rashawn Gary had 6 pressures. That was a season high. And then Edgerrin Cooper had his best game of the season, and then, of course, he gets hurt. Let me read you guys a quick stat on this. Before the Edgerrin Cooper injury, the Bears were averaging 4.8 yards per play and a 30% success rate. When Edgerrin Cooper got hurt, that went up to 7 yards per play added and a 47% success rate. So they were averaging basically another 3 yards per play and another 17% of success rate. So when Edgerrin Cooper went out, that was basically the death nail for this defense. And Caleb, they put him in hell the first 3 quarters, 2.5 quarters. And then the 4th quarter, everything went to hell. So again, not saying this is Hafley's fault, but why is nobody mad at Jeff Hafley? The defense couldn't get a stop in the 4th quarter. They gave up 25 points in the 4th quarter. So why is he not getting any blame from Packer fans, right? That's why the Packers lost much more than the offense from LaFleur. And again, I'm not blaming Hafley, but it's just annoying to see that. I understand everybody has to have their boogeyman after the game like this, and I know how high the expectations were. We talked about it in this show a ton, but sometimes shit just happens. Only one team can win every season. It's that simple. Winning a Super Bowl is insanely hard. And I know you always hear it's the standard in Green Bay is Super Bowl. Super Bowls in Green Bay. Or the coach needs to go. It's just such a Stone Age way of looking at it. And I'm not saying that that's not the case. Everybody in the NFL is trying to win a Super Bowl every year. Now, some teams have different windows. Some people, like the Browns, that's not their goal this season. Or whoever. Jets. How about the Jets? The way I've seen people call for blood in relation to Matt LaFleur is insane to me. Now, I personally, again, we want to blame somebody. If there were more candidates out there that made sense, I would actually be for getting rid of Matt LaFleur. We'll talk about it in future episodes, especially once this unfolds. I really am waiting to hear like some news. That's why I'm not talking about the LaFleur thing today. The biggest hurdle for this team is making sure that a loss like this doesn't have a ripple effect going into next season, and I think that's a real possibility. And changing the culture, that might be the right thing to do. But none of us lame men know shit about it. I do know, though, that very few candidates out there would be an upgrade. In fact, I don't think any of them are. Those of you that want John Harbaugh, I love John Harbaugh. I do. But if you don't like how LaFleur has performed in the playoffs, if you're one of these, it's Super Bowl or bust, we are title town, not division town, or whatever. The Ravens have collapsed at epic proportions since he's been the coach. And he's going to bring in Todd Monken, who's his offensive coordinator, who I thought was terrible this year. That's why the Ravens fired Harbaugh, by the way, because he wanted to bring Monken back. The only option I like, by the way, is Brian Flores to run the defense. And then you get like a Mike McDaniel to run the offense. But anyway, my point is, I'm not blaming Jeff Hafley, but the fact that no one has talked about him and the defense giving up 25 points blows my mind. By no means am I saying they should fire LaFleur or they shouldn't or they should. I'm not talking about that. But Hafley not getting any blame from Packer fans is hilarious. Now, we'll talk about Hafley more going into future episodes. LaFleur did say on Monday he's pretty sure that Hafley's going to get a head coaching job. And I think that when he does, LaFleur's going to hire his buddy Raheem Morris, which is probably the right call. But again, that's for a future episode. So what I wanted to do next is do essentially a season recap and just kind of go through the emotions and the roller coaster. So I don't want to call it a yearbook style, but my coworker Jenna, shout out Jenna, she gave me this idea, and I did want to do a recap of like this anyway, and maybe call it yearbook style, or in her words, stages of grief, and just kind of talk about the emotions we all felt. So let's rewind all the way to the NFL draft, right? This is the first time since watching the draft that they actually drafted the guy that I wanted. I think a lot of Packer fans wanted Matthew Golden too, especially when he was still there. Not only did they actually draft him, I didn't expect them to draft a receiver, let alone Matthew Golden. I didn't think he'd be there. But this was the first receiver taken in round one since Javon Walker in 2002. It was an electric feeling, guys, when Mark Murphy yelled out, "For the first time since 2002, we draft a wide receiver." And I just went nuts. I'm like, oh my God, it's happening. And then when they said Matthew Golden, I freaked out. I ran around the apartment screaming like a psycho. I thought my wife was going to file for divorce. I hope I'm not the only one that felt that way. The way that Mark Murphy announced at the pop of the crowd, that was the first like, oh my God, this season is going to be magical, right? Then we fast forward to August. At that point, we kind of felt like this team was going to be competitive. I was certainly not picking them to win the Super Bowl. I thought that their ceiling was NFC Championship. I thought they would make it there. And then we get a post from Pretty Ricky, the dog Twitter profile, the leaker guy, Ricky Leaks or whatever. And he'd been, reporting on correct reports for a while. He'd also had some L's, right? Some misses. But the Packers were interested in Micah Parsons. So we all start to get excited, but, we've heard it before, right? Khalil Mack comes to mind. Tony Gonzalez back in the 2014 time period. Excuse me. Packers are always the guy or the team in the conversation, right? But this time it's different, right? Fast forward to August 26th, he reports the Packers have an offer on the table for Micah Parsons to make him the highest paid defensive player in the league, blah, blah, blah. But would it actually happen? Probably not. We're going to end up losing out last minute to another team. But the very next day, August 27th, I'm in the middle of moving to my new house. I'm cleaning out my storage closet downstairs, which I never get serviced, by the way, down there. But a text comes through from Laven that they actually did it, my cousin Laven. The Packers trade 2 first-round picks and Kenny Clark for Micah frickin' Parsons. The greatest trade, the history of the Green Bay Packers. And at that point, I freaked out. I ran upstairs, screamed, probably cried some happy tears, right? Turned out all the podcasters, all the media that I could watch while picking up my apartment. Unanimously, this was the move the Packers needed to be Super Bowl contenders, right? We got LVN, Rashawn Gary, Devontae Wyatt, now Micah Parsons, combined with Edgerrin Cooper, Xavier McKinney, up-and-comers like Evan Williams, Javon Bullard, so on and so forth. So heading into week 1, right, we're on cloud 9. Then we get to week 1. Season started out with a big win against the Lions, who coming into the season were many folks' Super Bowl pick. And the Packers get their most impressive win in basically, 4 years? The Lions team that at that point was very, very good, coming off 15-2 or whatever it was last season. They're on top of the world, right? Micah Parsons' debut was insane. It was insane. It was dream-worthy, I would say. The sack that he had on Jared Goff, the pressures that he got that led to an Evan Williams interception, a couple 3-and-outs, right? They had an insane defensive performance, completely locked down the Lions, who were the best offense in the NFL for a couple years. They were actually the best offense in the NFL this season, by the way. Also, at that point, we're all, again, cloud 9 becomes cloud 12, right? We're all stoked. And then they play the Commanders. And don't let anybody fool you, right? Many people picked them to be Super Bowl contenders in the NFC. At that point, they had Jaden Daniels healthy. They had the team healthy. And the Packers beat the piss out of them. So again, we're all on top of the world. We got Cleveland next week, right? Every pundit in the country is talking about how good the Packers are. They're Super Bowl favorites, the best team in the NFL, so on and so forth. And us Packer fans were just eating it up. I know I was. Then they go to Cleveland. They lay an egg on offense. Inexplicably lose the game to Cleveland, who couldn't move the ball the whole game by 10 points. The physical high that I felt seeing our defense play that well. Remember, it was fun to watch the defense at that point. They were flying around, hitting people. They had pressure on the quarterback almost every play. It felt like everything was going to plan. And on top of that, guys, let's think about the first 2 games. Jordan Love looked like the 2023 version of himself. And that's what we were all hoping and wondering. Could he play to that level again? But even then, you could see at times the offensive line got real shaky. They lost Zach Tom at the end of the Lions game. And if you think back to Detroit, right, before Zach Tom got hurt, Jordan Love had days to throw back there. But then we get to Cleveland, we get our hearts ripped out. The Packers defense dominates for the 3rd game in a row, but they can't pass protect against the Browns defensive line, who was really good all year, right? They couldn't run the ball. The field shrunk like crazy against that Jim Schwartz defense. And then we get to the end, right? They're winning 10-0 late in the 4th. Cleveland gets a little drive going with the running game. They make it 10-3. There's only 3 minutes left. Jordan just needs a first down and they win. Drops back, goes for the kill shot, throws an interception for a insane interception, right? Then you get the Browns. They got 15 yards to go. They get a touchdown, and it's a 10-10 game. 10-10. Brutal. Instead, and I'm not going to talk through the details, right? They get a first down, they win. Instead, they get an interception. Browns win. It sucked. But again, we finished that game. We the defense completely crushed the Browns offense. If Jordan just made one different throw, or McManus, again, their kick gets blocked when they could have won the game in that game too. Let's not forget that. McManus misses or makes that kick. The Packers are 3-0. We're feeling good, right? Now it's the Cowboys game. Micah's return to Dallas. The Packers get up to a 13-0 lead early in the game. The defense at that point was shutting down Dak and the Cowboys' lethal offense, right? Jordan Love and the offense, they hadn't even punted yet. They're cooking, right? They score that second touchdown. Packers line up to kick, and they get the extra point blocked. And not only do they block the extra point, Dallas, they return it all the way to the end zone for 2 points. And you could just feel the momentum shift there. And then inexplicably, if you guys haven't heard that word enough today, the defense just falls apart. They didn't get a stop the rest of the game, hardly. Dak Prescott sees God in this one. That's what I kept saying. He went God mode. He played out of his mind in this game. Completely out of his mind. The Packers, they get a stop in overtime. They hold the Cowboys to a field goal. And then the Packers go down. They get the ball. They score a touchdown. They win. Instead, they have horrible clock management. They go down. They barely get the last play off and leave 1 second left. They kick a field goal to tie it. So, needless to say, it would have been nice if Dallas didn't get 2 points on a return 2-point conversion. They didn't get those points. Packers would have won that game. So, again, you finish those 4 games. You head into the bye week. You're like, okay, we saw the ceiling of this team, both offensively and defensively. They're 2-1-1. And that tie just felt ugly the whole season. I don't know if you guys felt that same way. It did for me. But you're feeling a little bit optimistic, a little bit nervous. Injuries haven't hit the fan yet. Zach Tom was close to returning. Then it's a very interesting stretch of games. So quarter one of the season's over. They're 2-1-1. Then you get the Bengals, Cardinals, and Steelers. Okay. Now the Bengals game felt a lot closer than it should have. The Packers win by 10 points in that game. Offense looked pretty good, but you started to see a blueprint that teams could use to beat the defense, right? Get the ball out quick before Micah can get there. Attack these cornerbacks. But again, the Bengals game's a solid win. They score 27. The offense looks good. They win. Then you get to the Cardinals game, right? And the Cardinals had a horrible record at the end of the year, but at that point, they looked better than their record would indicate. And you're playing in Arizona, right? That game gets really close all the way to the end. Jordan ends up hitting Tucker Kraft on a 4th down that extends the game. They go down and they score the game-winning touchdown. Micah Parsons gets 3 sacks, right? You start to see a thread beginning to unravel, though. It was a bumpy game on offense, lots of mistakes. Jordan was under a lot of pressure in the game, ironically. And defensively, the Cardinals, they made some pretty clutch plays against the Packers defense. The 4th and 18 or whatever it was, or 3rd and 18, where Jacoby Brissett completes it all the way down the sideline. Right, there were just some plays in that game where you're like, Jesus, man, come on. But the Packers win. They win 27-23, and you never apologize for winning, right? And then you get to the Steelers game, which at that point was the highlight of the season for me at that point. Packers-Steelers, Aaron Rodgers return, right, to playing the Packers. First half, the Packers were bumpy as hell. There's a ton of mistakes. Another case of just beating themselves, right, which foreshadowed the inconsistency, which would eventually be their demise, right? They're down 16-7 at half, and then the 3rd and the 4th quarter, Jordan Love just goes off. Completes 20 straight passes or whatever it was. Packers end up blowing out the Steelers. They get their biggest win of the year at that point from a point standpoint. They win 35-25. And at that point, right, many experts were talking about the Packers being the best team in the NFC again. 3 straight wins. We're all feeling good, right? The Packers beat Aaron Rodgers, blah, blah, blah. 5-1-1 heading into Carolina at home, right? Then we hit our first dark point in the season. Packers lose against the Panthers 16-13. In a game that, by the way, they never once punted. Bryce Young only threw for 103 yards, and the Packers lose. Now, they did have a Rico Dowdle, the Panthers running back, had a good game there, right? But they lose due to historically bad efforts in the red zone. There was a bad Jordan Love interception at the end, which one of the few that he threw all season, right? A devastating loss to a team at that point that had no playoff equity. Now, that loss does look a little bit better in hindsight. They beat the Rams. They almost beat them in the playoffs. The Panthers made the playoffs, right? But you're coming off a big win against Aaron Rodgers and the Steelers. You're 5-2-1 after a devastating loss to the Panthers. Now, you host the Super Bowl champions at home. And you're feeling pretty shitty about yourself, right? I know I did at that point. Every pundit was giving them insane amounts of hell for losing that Panthers game. We start to see the early calls for Matt LaFleur's head, right? All the while, quietly the offensive line and the protections going to shit, hell in a handbasket. The Eagles game comes. The Packers perform admirably on defense. They hold the Eagles to 10 points, right? If you came into that game saying, yo, you guys will hold the Eagles to 10 points, I would have said, oh, they're going to win for sure. I thought this was their best defensive performance of the season, and we're feeling good about it. But the offensive line gets dominated by Philly up front. Mental mistakes all over the field, right? Particularly at the end. Love hits Watson on that little deep out, gets all the way to the 15. They score a touchdown there, they probably win. But instead, Bo Melton gets called for an illegal motion penalty. And that felt like the biggest kick in the balls that I've ever had. That was the maddest that I'd gotten all season. And sorry if my Aunt Julie's listening to this. You were over for the game. I'm sorry. I crashed out hard there. And then there was the Packers were about to go down and score the game-winning touchdown. Nobody thought they were going to do it. I certainly didn't. And I'm a pretty optimistic guy. The famous inside handoff out of shotgun on 4th down. Jacobs gets stuffed. Packers lose. Now they're 5-3-1. Now, you start to feel the season slipping a little bit, right? You start out 2-0. You're 3-3-1 since then. Now you head to New York. You're feeling like shit. Jameis Winston starting, though, instead of Russell Wilson. Jackson Dart is out. Jameis keeps it close. Now, the Packers did drop 4 interceptions in that game that could have swung the game. In fact, if they just caught 2 of those, I think this would have been a blowout. Jordan Love comes out, plays out of his mind in this game. He has like a 96 PFF grade despite like a million drops, and the Packers dropped 6 passes in this game. We get to late in the game, third and long, game on the line. Jordan drops back, makes an insane throw to Savion Williams, who converts a long-ass third down. I think it was like 3rd and 10. But if they don't convert that third down, they lose. And Savion Williams saves the season. I thought at that point that was a season-saving play. And nobody's been talking about how improbable that was, right? This game could have easily gone the other way if Savion hadn't caught it. Instead, he did catch it. Jordan on the next play throws a dime to Christian Watson in the end zone for the go-ahead touchdown. And with that Giants game, it felt like maybe there was a turning point, but the offensive line played terrible against a really good Giants front, yes, but they squeak out a win, right? 6-3-1. Then we get to the Vikings game, which was the game I attended, and it was amazing, right? My wife's first Packer game, my first as a fully formed adult and fan, I would say. Yeah, it was great. They win it 23-6. They won it untraditionally. They took the air out of the ball. They ran it down the Vikings' throats the whole game. Going into that game, the Giants game was a win. He didn't feel great about it. But J.J. McCarthy played horribly. You're like, okay, maybe he ends up being good. We'll see. Now, the Packers get to what I would call run-it mode against the Flores defense. They end up winning the game. Micah Parsons, Devontae Wyatt. The defense laid waste to J.J. McCarthy. They won the game handily, right? And it felt like this game was the possible turning point, right? They're 7-3-1. It felt like the way the Giants game ended, combined with the defense putting on a good showing against the Vikings, that, again, this is a team that beat you twice the year before and has beaten you quite handily several times the last couple of years. We left that game, especially leaving the game, like actually leaving the game, it felt like we felt pretty good about things, right? They won. They're 7-3-1. Felt like they were being slept on a little bit. No one was talking about them anymore. Then came the Thanksgiving game. I think that game, Lions-Packers, one person in the media picked the Packers that I can remember. The Lions just beat the Giants. They were starting to surge a little bit. Lions fans all season talking mad shit about how, oh, you just wait till Detroit, bro, or you wait till Thanksgiving. We actually hosted Thanksgiving in our house. I was nervous as hell for that game. I thought there was a world where the offense and Jordan could score on this Lions team, but I just didn't think the Packers defense could hold them. Because at that point, the Lions offense was playing insane. Like Jahmyr Gibbs just had 200 yards, whatever it was. They win that game. The Packers beat the Lions. What ended up being a signature win on the season. It was incredibly impressive. Jordan Love balled the hell out. They aired it out the whole game. And they stayed one score ahead of the Lions the whole game. It was capped off by an insane 4th down conversion to clinch the game to Dontavian Wicks. That was the one game this season where Wicks showed what he could do. And, of course, add to the misery, he was hurt all season. Right? I thought he was going to take a big step forward this year, but he was hurt all season. He was hurt after this game. But he showed in that game how special he can be, right? Jordan balled the hell out, announced himself firmly as an MVP candidate. We're all feeling incredible, right? At that point, the Lions were firmly a playoff team. No question at that time. I know the Lions ended up finishing 9-8, but they were a playoff team at that point. And the Packers were 8-3-1. Then comes Bears game number 1. All week long, Bears fans talking shit. It culminated into what an insane environment at Lambeau Field. The Bears were 9-3. The Packers were 8-3-1. Both teams fighting for first place in the NFC North at that point. I went into that game confident the Packers could score like hell on this Bears team. And they did just that. Jordan balled out, dominated. Until late in the game, we saw a glimpse of what would be the comeback kids story for the Bears. Jordan Love, again, he balls out. At the end of the game, Josh Jacobs has the run of the season. A late touchdown to put the Packers up 28-21. Then we see Caleb Williams start his magic. Drives them all the way down the field. 4th and 3. Throws a pick to Keyshawn Nixon, right? We're all just hyped as hell. Excited as hell. The Bears fans, they all slap a moral victory tag on the game. Because, hey, like, we're for real. It's the best we've done against the Packers, blah, blah, blah. We kind of all laughed. We rolled our eyes. LOL a little bit. 9-3-1. Packers are fully in control of the NFC North. They control their own destiny. So basically 2 more wins gets them the title. And you look at the upcoming games, you see, yeah, you can win 2 games. It's Broncos, Bears, Ravens, Vikings. So let's take a moment before we move on. The last win of the season would be the last win of the season. How great we all felt there. They beat the Bears. They won 4 games in a row. Everything was clicking. Their offensive line was better. Sean Ryan was settling in. Anthony Belton was playing good football. Zach Tom is healthy. The offense is a machine at that point. The defense, they're starting to put together some good stuff, right? Micah's, at that point, the leading defensive player of the year, betting favorite. Jordan Love, he's in the MVP conversation. The offense looked like they fixed all the problems that they had against Carolina and Philly. But more importantly, the Packers were clearly the best team, or maybe second best team in the NFC at that point. It felt like the NFC was wide-ass open for the taking, and the Packers were playing the best out of those teams for sure. And I would say the best football to date for them. Now they got Denver, the number one seed in the AFC. They got a juggernaut for a defense, but a quarterback in Bo Nix who's been a bit leaky, right? Had some really close wins in the season, narrowly beat the Raiders. They felt a little bit fraudulent, but still a good team, right? Really, really good measuring stick for the Packers. And if you think if you move to 10-3-1, you beat this Broncos team, you score on it, they're probably at the top of every power ranking at that point, the Packers are. They're probably the betting favorites to reach the Super Bowl in the NFC. Jordan Love beating the Denver defense, he's probably neck and neck with May and Stafford for MVP. The kickoff comes. Packers get a turnover on the Broncos' first drive, right? We're feeling good. Micah Parsons forced a fumble, recovered it by himself on that play. The Packers moved the ball up and down the field on this Broncos defense. Offensive line, we all thought that was a major concern against this Broncos front. Jordan was clean the whole first half, barely got hit. And then the running game, they were humming for the first time all year. And then mid-second quarter, Zach Tom gets hurt with a knee injury. And at that point, you start to scratch. You're starting to itch a little bit. You're like, ugh. Start to worry a little bit. How do they protect against this Broncos defensive line? But instead, they go down, they score, right? I think right after Zach Tom got hurt, that was the crazy pass up the sideline to Josh Jacobs. And then you get to the third quarter. The Packers get the ball after half. Josh Jacobs has his longest run of the season. He scores a touchdown, a long run, 23-14, 9-point lead well into the third quarter. They get the Broncos back the ball. The Packers get a stop. Of course, it's a Micah Parsons pressure, right? They punt the ball to the Packers. You got a chance to go up by essentially 30-14 here. So Matt LaFleur smells blood in the water. He wants to blow the game open. He dials up a deep shot to Christian Watson. Now keep in mind, Anthony Belton, the rookie, and Darian Kennard had just replaced Zach Tom. That's the right side of the offensive line. Jordan drops back. Watson beats Pat Surtain clean on a deep over route. Jordan throws it, but as he throws it, he gets hit because, again, Zach Tom's replacement, Darian Kennard, allows a pressure, and the throw is short by about 3 yards. Surtain picks the ball off. It appeared that Watson broke his collarbone, which we didn't know at that time. But now the Broncos have the ball. They score. They make it 23-21. Watson's injury felt like the breaking point for the offense, and I felt like they completely collapsed at that point. The next drive, the Broncos take the field. Bo Nix rolls to his right. Xavier McKinney drops a pick. The next couple plays, Micah Parsons tears his ACL in a non-contact play. And the feeling that you had as a Packer fan when that happened, I can't even describe it. It felt like at that moment, the Super Bowl was off. You lose your best player, which he was the best player on this team this year. Any team who loses their best player, no matter how good they are, it just gets really hard to win a Super Bowl at that point. And that's just such a what-if game at that point. If McKinney just catches that pick, does Micah tear his ACL? The pick was in his hands. It was in the breadbasket. He dropped it. Do the Packers win that game if Micah doesn't get hurt? Then you lose Evan Williams, your up-and-coming star on defense. So in the span of one game, you lose Zach Tom, what would be eventually a season-ending injury. You lose Micah Parsons, right? 2 of your 5 best players. And at that point, everything changed. The Packers never won again in 2025. So at that point, game is over, right? Packers are officially 9-4-1 at that point. They're still well within range of achieving a division title, right? There's 3 games left. All they need to do is beat the Bears and then one of their final 2, and then they're NFC North champions, right? That's how it was at that point in the season, right? We find out after the game, Watson's not seriously hurt, which I don't even know how the hell that's true, right? I was fully convinced he was going to miss the rest of the season, and here we are again with Watson getting hurt. He finally breaks out. He's our number 1 receiver, blah, blah, blah. Well, he miraculously did not fracture his collarbone or whatever we thought it was, right? He ended up being okay. And Evan Williams is fine too. I think he only missed 1 game. Zach Tom, obviously we knew, like I said, there weren't like, he didn't come back in the game. LaFleur was kind of non-committal. He said, yeah, he's going to miss some time, but he didn't have any, concern of it being long-term. So in my mind, I'm like, if they make the playoffs, he'll be back, maybe even a couple weeks. So offensively, you knew they'd probably be okay, right? Zach Thomas hurt, right? But you don't have any scary defensive lines coming up, right, with the Bears or Ravens. And at that point, guys, by the way, the Ravens have been playing bad. Let's not forget. And as long as, again, Zach Thomas back by the playoffs, you're good. Myself included, I talked myself into the defense being okay. You guys remember the episodes, right? They were a top 5 defense last season in some metrics without Micah Parsons. Hafley wants to be a head coach. He's got a bunch of interviews. It looks like there was still hope, right? And the NFC looks increasingly weak at that point. So then it's Bears-Packers. It's Lambeau South in Chicago. It's the second time in 3 weeks the Bears and the Packers play. And, after the Packers lose to the Broncos, the Bears convincingly beat the Browns. Now it's a division game again for the division title. Through the first quarter, 8 minutes left in the second or whatever it was, the Packers are moving the ball really, really well. They hadn't punted yet. Bears hadn't scored. Jordan Love gets hit hard, illegally, and dirty, in my opinion, and he leaves the game with a concussion. So now you've lost Jordan Love, Micah Parsons, Devontae Wyatt, Tucker Kraft, Zach Tom. 5 of your best 7 players, maybe 10, I don't know. But instead of caving in that game, the Packers defense, without Micah Parsons, shuts the Bears the hell down for 58 minutes. Malik Willis comes in. He comes in, plays really well. You get the game to 16-6. 16-6. Caleb drops back, 3rd and 20. The game's almost over, right? Warren Brinson finally gets a sack on Caleb after he plays Houdini the whole game. It's 4th down. Bears are out of field goal range. Game's over. But instead, Brinson lightly grazes Caleb's face mask. And by the way, this is a real penalty. I'm not saying it should have been called a penalty. The Bears get new life. They kick a field goal. 16-9. 2 minutes left. Then they line up for the onside kick. And at no point here was anyone feeling like this game was going to implode, right? All they need to do is recover an onside kick. What do? They drop it. Romeo Doubs inexplicably drops the ball. And at that point, you just knew shit was hitting the fan, and eventually it did. The Bears win that game. The Packers had the division in their hands, literally in their hands, without Micah Parsons. Malik Willis coming in clutch in this game. All you had to do was recover an onside kick, and instead you drop it, and at that point it just felt like for 2 weeks in a row the season was over. And guys, remember, that if 5 things go different, 5 things in that game, if even one of those things goes differently, they win. Right? 5 things had to go wrong. I'm not going to go through them all, but if they win that game, the Packers win the NFC North, regardless of what happens against Minnesota and Baltimore, right? Instead, they don't. They're basically cursed to be the 7th seed. And speaking of cursed, guys, I think the season was cursed at that point. I kept saying it to everybody. I don't know if I said it in the podcast, but I feel like the players thought it too. And how could you not, right? These are human beings. I said it right after the Broncos game. I said it to my wife. I said it to people at work. When Micah Parsons got hurt, the Super Bowl was dead at that point, right? They went to hell at that point. The Super Bowl chances went to hell. But they had hope. They still had hope. If they played as well as they have in the past, or at least as well as they'd shown us they can play, they could still make some noise, right? They start to do it. You see proof of concept, even without Jordan Love. And then that Bears collapse happens. It's just gut-wrenching, right? It's just like getting your heart ripped out 2 times in 2 weeks. It truly was one of the low points in my Packers fandom. Both the way the Broncos lost, losing Micah Parsons, guys. I was so excited when they got Micah. I already talked about it. Micah's one of my favorite players in the NFL. He might be my favorite player in the NFL now that he's a Packer, right? But that 2-game stretch was one of the low points in my Packers fandom. And then what happens the next week? The Ravens game happens, right? For the 3rd time this season, they don't punt and they still lose. The Packers don't punt and they lose. Derrick Henry runs out. He runs for 1,000,000 yards. Defense looks like they just gave up in that game. Guys, by the way, I just got a text. Derrick Henry just scored again for the 40th time. He just scored again. So losing that game sealed their fate, right? We knew they'd be the 7th seed, and then that's where I'm going to stop the nightmare part of this show, recapping the season. But we cannot stop. We have to talk about this before I wrap this up. You cannot talk about the 2025 season without talking about bad luck. You just can't. We already talked about the injury luck, and I'll probably continue talking about it in other episodes when we recap the season. But we have to talk about the pure improbability of going 0-3 in the 2 Bears games and that Browns game to go backwards a little bit. This is a crazy stat for you guys. And again, every season, every successful season in the NFL, every Super Bowl champion has some level of luck that goes their way. It's just always the case, right? This is not purely like whoever plays the best every Sunday is going to win the Super Bowl. It's not that way. If only it were that simple, right? Crazy stat for you guys. The Packers had a 99% chance to win the Browns game with 3 minutes left in the game. Same thing with the Week 16 game against the Bears. 3 minutes left in the game. They had a 99% chance to win the game. In the Bears playoff game, they had a 96% chance to win with 6 minutes left. The Packers went 0-3 in those games. The most improbable outcome you could possibly imagine. The chances of them going 0-3 in those games, and I double-checked this, the chances of them going 0-3 in those games was a 1 in 250,000 chance. 1 in 250,000, and that happened this season. That's how insane this collapse was. And if you guys want to know why LaFleur is going to be back, you can blame it on whatever, but at some point you have to blame luck too. It's not the whole story. It's not the only thing, right? But if they win just one of those games, if they win the Bears game, are we looking at this season differently after losing all these star players? They beat the Bears in the playoffs the other night. Are we really looking at this season as a failure? I still think they have a chance to go beat Seattle next week. I do. But they lost it, right? They win the Browns game, right? They end up winning 10 games. They're 10-6-1? Like, we're feeling pretty good. They win the Browns and Bears game. The Packers win the NFC North easily, right? Maybe they're the 3 seed. I think they actually would be the 3 seed. Or the 2 seed, sorry. Even if they win 2 out of 3, right? They win all 3, right? They're playing in Seattle next week, and they're probably hosting the Bears last week. Crash out over. To summarize, before we wrap up here, this season there were some really, really high highs, right? Starting with the Golden selection in the draft, the Micah Parsons acquisition, the debut of Micah Parsons, sacking Jared Goff. Some of the highest highs I can remember since the Super Bowl, honestly. And then some of the lowest lows I've ever felt as a Packers fan. Losing Micah Parsons against Denver, the 2 Bears losses, watching Derrick Henry dice you up when Malik Willis is balling out. But the way we felt as Packer fans mirrored exactly how they played this season, up and down and inconsistent. So was this season a success? No, it wasn't. Was it because they didn't win the Super Bowl? No, I don't define a season on a Super Bowl victory. If you guys remember what Giannis said when they lost in the playoff a few years ago, that's what I look at it. But the season did teach us a few things, right? The highs that this team can play at are higher than anything we've seen from a Packer team in over a decade, since that Super Bowl team. But the lows are a young team who can't get out of their own damn way. So 2026 is all about putting teams away, playing closer to their ceiling for an extended period of time, not just for a couple games where then they shit the bed the next game, right? They have to shore up the offensive line. That's priority number 1. I think there's enough options out there to do it. They got enough draft picks to do it. I think the defensive line needs another starter to pair with Devontae Wyatt. Maybe Warren Brinson step up. Maybe we see Colby Wooden take another step. And then priority number 2 is probably cornerback. They cannot go into 2026 with these same guys. So we'll see how that goes. I do think there's some options in the draft. There actually are some free agents that they're going to like too, which we will preview at some point as well. This team is not far away. And if you paid attention closely, there were bad injuries, really bad luck. Yeah, but they were really, really close to a special season. And that's just how it goes sometimes. That's why I wanted to go through this, kind of go through all the emotions that were the game or this season. Now we're going to fast forward a little bit. We're going to look at 2026. Well, actually, no, we won't. We're going to keep recapping the season, but we're not going to do this doom scroll version of this again, I promise. Got a lot of fun topics coming up. I'm going to try to record 2 podcasts a week going forward. I have a lot of content that I want to record. I'm going to try to get this show on YouTube soon as well, where I can pair this with the YouTube video as well. Hopefully you guys enjoy that. Another platform to maybe get some more listeners and viewers. If you don't want to see my ugly mug, just keep listening to the podcast. But I just wanted to thank all of you from the bottom of my heart for any support you've given throughout the season. It was a long season. It was my first year of doing Packers content, and I tried to stick to 2 a week. I did it for the most part the whole season. I'm really happy you guys kept listening, kept downloading it. I want to do a Q&A soon, so if you guys want to send me some questions to answer on the show. Otherwise, I'm just going to ask ChatGPT again. We'll see if that gets better than last time as well. But looking forward to diving into the season a little deeper in a more positive way than this one starting next week. So I will talk to you guys soon. Thank you guys for listening. And as always, go Pack, go.